Ever since I've seen the footprint wrenches, seen the nice restorations by our group, I've wanted one. I've looked on eBay, and of course, everyone I found was from England or parts of Europe. And just the cost of them, along with the shipping cost, was just too much. But I diligently looked and looked and looked and looked, and by golly, I found one. Here's the nice 9-inch model I found. Actually was in fairly good shape. Not rusty, just patina, real patina, I guess you'd call it. And of course this was the early model with the bolt and the nut through there that you had to move by hand to make it larger. And of course a nice footprint logo and made in England. Again, repeated footprint, the footprint along with made in England. I'm sure it'll stand out even more after it's cleaned, but a good one to have. And of course, while I was looking, lo and behold, there appeared another one, an adjustable one. One I have not seen before in all my searching. Been looking for a long time. Works great. Again, not rusty. Been used, worn, but in good shape. This one strangely has 3 footprint logos on it. One here, and one down here. Nice and clear. Should look really nice. And once it's cleaned and restored. On the back it just says all steel made in England. But they really were proud of the footprint. So that gives me 2 great wrenches to restore. I'll be giving you all a view of these shortly after I get my restoration completed. The first footprint wrench that I restored was the standard base model, and this is the early model with the adjustment by removing and moving to the different holes, moving this nut. And as you can see on this wrench, the original nut was missing, the bolt was missing, and they actually just put a 6mm bolt through here and then put actually a brass nut on the backside. They weren't looking for appearances, they were just looking for utility to make the wrench work. Here it is finished, and there's quite a change from the original. We put a nice finish on it. The name stands out now, the footprint logo. Of course, the problem still exists. This. So here's what I did to solve that issue. I was looking for a thumb screw that was knurled around the edges for gripping and turning, and I came up with this item. This was out of one of my old desktop computers, and it was the thumb screw to hold the back panel on, or side panel, as many of you are probably familiar with. You could just turn it by hand and remove it. Of course, this screw size on here is extremely small. It's not going to work. So I needed a 6mm bolt. So I came up with this 6mm bolt, and of course it had a hex head and a hex insert. Would work with a hex wrench or an Allen wrench, but that's not going to look very good on there. So I took this part, I cut off that threaded portion. I drilled a 5/16 hole in the end here, which was just a hair smaller than that round part here underneath. Let me try to show it to you. These are the threads that were removed. This is the rounded portion here that I want to insert into here. And I was quite successful. Here's the finished product. Inserted this portion into here. Polished this part because it was a black color, and came up with a nice thumb screw, which we will now replace in this tool. And there we have the finished product. A nice thumb screw, easy to reach and get to, stands off from the surface a little bit, that's okay. And it looks nice. It's not, this was originally a kind of a combination slotted Phillips type part that looked like this. But I ground it down some, flattened it, polished it. And of course the key thing was keeping the knurled portion on the sides. So there we have the finished bolt. Easy to remove and move to change up the tool. This tool was originally, it may have been discussed before, but this tool was originally invented, the owner invented it to actually remove grinding wheels from machinery. Wanted something that would grip tightly and remove it. And while it's not stated anywhere, I'm just assuming that this pry bar on the end, it's really not a screwdriver, it's a pry bar, was used to help pry whatever nut you loosened here, or pry the grinding wheel off. It all had to do with removing the grinding wheel. Later on in the mid-1800s, the tool was converted or put together and marketed as a pipe wrench. And you know, it's a very simple design. The folded over metal, the plate in the middle there to support it. And of course, the tighter you grip and pull on this, the tighter this becomes. It is strong. It's a strong, very, very simple design that's endured, you know, well over 100 years, and is still going strong. And you know, by 1958, there were 10 million of these tools made. Produced by the original company. There's been a lot of copies, but the original company had made 10 million by then, and we don't see them in the United States. I actually had to buy this tool and have it shipped over from the UK. I was unable to find any here. Evidently it hasn't taken off and sold here at all, even though I see there's some outlets now that sell it. Another interesting component was this wrench was made just for me, even though it's 100 years old, over 100 years old. How do I know that? It's got my initials engraved in it. JF, John Fix. There it is. This tool was made just for me, so I was destined to have it. Really turned out nice. I'm pleased with it. The other wrench, actually before I leave this one, one thing I did notice when I was doing the research on it, it's commonly referred to as a footy, for footprint. So evidently well liked by everyone. They gave it a nickname. They called it a footy. Thought that was an interesting item. The second item I found, they called a footprint shifting spanner. The idea that you can move the jaws on it. So they called it a shifting spanner wrench. And don't know the date on the origin of this wrench. I looked and looked. I couldn't find it. Perhaps some of our listeners from Europe can tell me some more about it and about the origins of this one. But this one also needed some work. And of course, here it is finished. I did it in a natural type finish, cleaned and polished best I could. But I didn't put any high shine on it. I didn't want to remove anything. And to me, the wrench just sort of looked right that way. Putting a high shine on this would be difficult because the only way to really do it and do it properly would be to remove these rivets, take it completely apart. And because of having to get into all these areas, I just didn't know that I could get it back together right. I guess I could, but I wanted to keep it as original as possible. It says on the back side, all steel, made in England. And strangely enough, each part on the front was stamped with the footprint and the name. Here, here, here. All three components of it were stamped and logoed with the footprint. So there's a good way to tell that this one is going to be original. All original parts are used, because any component you replace would have the name on it. Works smoothly and nicely. It's meant to be a one-handed type operation. Again, strictly for nuts and bolts, that type. It's not really a pipe wrench there, just smooth jaws on it. Handy, good size wrench. We'll take a look at how it operates. I did a little bit of research since I started the video, because I wanted to try to be complete. This wrench was first, although it was made many years before, it was first marketed as a pipe wrench in 1875, the original footprint footy wrench. The adjustable shifting spanner was introduced in 1889. So give you some timeline on it. Wrenches are quite old, the designs are quite old, but timeless. Still work great. This wrench, of course, is just like any type of adjustable wrench. You just put it on, adjust it to the size, and there you go. And it's adjustable, and it works quite well. It'll work on square nuts, because originally that's what they had were square nuts. But as you know, that design works on hex nuts, the later type designs for nuts and bolts. This one has the jaws to work on a large one, although really doesn't have the size or the size to really get a good grip on it. In fact, the back end of this was banged and beat up pretty hard. And let me go on a little bit of a rant about that while I'm speaking of rants like we've heard lately. Small wrenches just beat the heck, like beat to death. That's because somebody doesn't take the time and use the proper wrench. The proper wrench for this larger size would be a larger wrench, not this small thing. You can't get the leverage on it. You can't get the grip on it that you need. So you take a hammer and you beat it and beat it and beat it, and you ruin your tools. Don't be lazy, people. Reach over in that toolbox, pick up the proper wrench to do the proper job. That's how they were designed. This is made for smaller items. And that way you preserve your tools, don't tear them up. Just nothing hurts me more than seeing a small tool beat up. The original wrench, of course, you can adjust it for different sizes by moving it. For smaller sizes, again, they started with square nuts. You put it on and you grip it and turn it. And of course, for round stock, it's got the jaws on it. This really, it'll work on the nuts and bolts, but it's really made for round stock. I don't have any handy to use here. But if you wanted to go to a bigger size, or even bigger, you could keep moving it. Doesn't take long to adjust it. And there you can get quite a grip, and of course as you get into larger pipes. But this one does work. By the larger the pipe you get, you adjust it and you grip it and turn, and it grips tight. It really grips tight. It works well. It's a nice pipe wrench. This design just, hasn't taken off here. Different designs started in the States. This wrench would do the job. Simple design, works quite well. So there you have it. Two great wrenches. Pleased to have them in my collection. Look nice. Will go great up on the wall. And thank you for listening.